when so many of you were meeting in Endeavor Hall to form the society, that such a large, dedicated, and remarkable group of individuals would be gathered here tonight commemorating a quarter century of accomplishment, good times and laughter, hard work, and above all, the preservation and interpretation of regional and local history. We have grown and made new friends, such as our good friends from England, who have been so helpful and instrumental in researching and providing us with the history of the Joel Clayton family. And we have maintained old friendships that go back to the early years of our town's history. This is indeed an evening to reminisce, celebrate, and make merry. We're fortunate to have some very special guests here tonight. If they would please stand as I introduce them. First, members of the Clayton family, Charles and Kathleen Callan. Edward and Betty Callan. And Violet Meyer. Who are great-grandchildren of Joel and Margaret McClay Clayton, and Joel and Margaret's great-great-grandson, Clayton Clark. We're very pleased you could all be here tonight. Also, we have 3 visitors from England. We're very honored to have Jeffrey and Sheila Timington from Bolton, England, with us this evening. Would you like to stand? The Timingtons have visited Clayton before and have spent the last several years researching and documenting the extended Clayton-based families. Jeff has compiled this information into a very interesting and readable manuscript, which you will find on the display tables over to the left. Please take a few minutes to peruse these important works. It will be in the Museum Research Library after tonight if you don't have time to look at it this evening. Our third visitor from England is my dear friend Audrey Todd from High Wycombe. Mary Lou Ellis and I met Audrey several years ago through our mutual friends Keith and Margaret Holford, familiar names to most of you. Kudos and heartfelt thanks to everyone who worked very hard to make this evening a success. As are most society events, it was a cooperative effort made possible by many, many people. The talented and industrious members of the committee who met throughout the past year to plan and organize the event. The interior decorators and setup crew who transformed the Holy Cross Lutheran Church Fellowship Hall into such a festive and elegant dining room. The newly assembled Clayton crowd who will entertain us with the official song, town song, Clayton Town. The imaginative individuals who designed and created the program memento of this celebration of our first 25 years, fashioned after the antique cards you'll find in the museum display, greetings and felicitations, opening Sunday, September 26th. The young people from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who willingly and graciously are assisting us in so many ways tonight, including performing lovely piano music while we dine. The lively and uniquely appropriate entertainment which you will be treated to later in the evening, and of course, our caterers who will provide the sumptuous repast for our enjoyment. Before I go and introduce the next person, I'd like to mention that these young people are here tonight to help us in any way that they can. They'll be glad to help you with your plates, to get your plates of food to the table. If you need more coffee or drink, let them know. They're just here to make our evening more enjoyable, and we really appreciate their help. And also there's a couple of mothers, I understand, that have come with them to help. So thank you, young people. come forward. Elaine Evans, who has done so much to make our museum vibrant and interesting, has done it again. But I'll let her tell you about her most recent triumph. Elaine?
On March 18th in 1964, can you hear me now? The people went to the polls and they decided they wanted to incorporate the city of Clayton. And it became a tradition that every year around March 18th, we'd all get together in the Endeavor Hall and we'd celebrate our birthday of Clayton. Well, in 1976, of course, the bicentennial was going on. So we not only celebrated the 12th birthday for the city of Clayton, but also the 200th birthday, of course, for the nation. At that time, we had a bicentennial theme for the birthday party, and different organizations that represented their projects and different displays that were there. But the latest project was a song that had been written for one of the projects for the bicentennial by Carolyn Smith. And Carolyn was, where's Carolyn? There she is. Okay, here we go. Carolyn, you want to take the place right here? This is our composer of our song that we're going to be hearing tonight. She wrote not only the music but the words. And that afternoon, her husband Jerry Smith, who was the director of the Ignacio Valley High School Chorus, brought his madrigal group, and they sang the song, and it just blew everybody away. It was just so gorgeous. There was a moment of silence, and everybody just went wild. It was so beautiful. So after that, shortly after that, the Clayton City Council adopted the song as the official Clayton City song. Each resident of the city received a copy of the song. The elementary school chorus sang it at the end of their spring music hall. A singing group was formed that was called the Clayton Crowd. And we'd all get together at Jerry and Carolyn's house, maybe a couple days before we were going to sing, and we'd get it all together and we'd sing for the community of tea, for the Historical Society, the first community of tea that we had, and for the museum when it was opened for the first time. And then we decided that we needed to have a larger group, and so we would sing. Jerry would bring the organ from the little portable organ from the Ignacio Valley High School, and we'd sing in front of the museum for the 4th of July. So some of those people are still around that sang that original crowd, and we have them here tonight. And then we decided that many years went by, Jerry and Carolyn moved away, and we needed to revive the song. So we have some of the original members, and then we have a whole flock of new people who have learned this lovely song. The original crowd was Dave and Mary Empey. Dave was the instrumental music teacher at the Aldo Elementary School, and he's our lead tenor along with his wife Mary, who is the soprano. Then Jerry had a choir in the Presbyterian choir, and he brought some of his friends along from the Presbyterian choir, and they sang with us. That's Patsy Paul, Carolyn, and Bob Nevins. Then we had actually the other singers, they not only sing, but they've been very instrumental as far as what has been going on with the Historical Society throughout the years. And one is Carolyn Bobat, who was the UCDC president that, of course, later on became our Historical Society. She came here from Seven Beach. She was the president that was in the interim period before we had a chance to vote for officers. We just assumed the UCDC officers, and so she actually was our first president. Connie Rare was one of our originals, and of course we know about Connie, the many things that she has done. She's our current curator. She was former president. And then we have the new singers, Diana Bauer, who was, first of all, Jerry and Carolyn also were involved in the early days of the Historical Society, and they had a fundraiser that was called Auction and Late Lunch at Scipollini's. And they got all Connie said, hey, that's such a good idea. We'll have an auction every year, and we're still having that auction. And Diana Bauer was the first chairman of that auction. She also was one of those people that was stripping all that wallpaper off the wall. Then we have Louise and Harvey Wall. Louise is very instrumental as far as our docent program. She's now taken over as the piano and organ player for our community. She's in the educational program, and Harvey, of course, is one of our ace photographers for many of our functions that we have. Roger Gilchrist is the one who donates his expertise in auditing our books and keeps us legal. Ron and Barbara Fogerson, they are also UCBC people, and Barbara was actually a recording secretary, and they have stayed with us all these years, of course, in the Historical Society. Andrea Blackman, she's a new member, believe it or not, and she, of course, is our president, and also is involved in just about everything that goes on in the museum. Joyce May Atkinson, I think that Joyce has probably poured more cups of tea than anybody else, because either as the AAUW president or representing the Library Foundation, she's always pouring tea at the community. And of course, Dave is the one that helps us out when our computer gets in a glitch. Mary Fryer is a new member, and she, of course, is in charge of our newsletter, Clayton Chronicle. She's our editor, and she also, of course, is one of our exhibit coordinators. Now, last but not least, we have someone who certainly should know how to sing about Clayton, because he's the great-grandson of Joel Clayton. And we have Charles Callan, who happens to also be a very fine tenor. And here is the song.
Oh, good team effort for the Historical Society and the City of Clayton. We're very pleased that we were able to get the winery saved in the form of City Hall. We're doing our best now to get Endeavor Hall back online where we can have events such as this there possibly. It's going to be about a $2 million project. It's being drawn up now. It'll be starting probably in spring. So about a year from this spring, year 2001 spring, we'll probably have a grand opening of the refurbished Endeavor Hall. The main building will be the same outside dimensions you see now, but probably the stage will be lowered to about 14 or 18 inches above the record park, so it'll be more an extension of the area to host events than you remember the stage. And the kitchen and the bathroom will be a new wing off to the side. We're buying the lot next door to Endeavor Hall, so we can make then a whole courtyard in that area. I think you're going to like it, and your committee has been a part of this. So hopefully you know about this happening. It's not a surprise to you. Anyway, we, in honor of tonight and the 25th anniversary, the City Council made a proclamation to show some of the respect and reverence that we have for your group. So I'll read the proclamation to you. City of Clayton Proclamation. Whereas the Clayton Historical Society was founded April 30th, 1974, and had its first meeting at Endeavor Hall. And whereas the Clayton Historical Society now has 413 members, and this year celebrates its 25th anniversary. And whereas the Clayton Historical Society is a volunteer-run organization that depends entirely on tax-deductible contributions, community fundraising efforts, and membership dues to meet expenses. And whereas the Society operates and maintains the Clayton Historical Society Museum and the restored Clayton Jail, as well as providing many other services to the community. And whereas the Society is dedicated to researching, displaying, preserving, and interpreting regional and local history, and in 1994 participated in the Heritage Preservation Task Force to set priorities for the preservation and restoration of historic sites in Clayton. And whereas the Society provides docents to conduct tours of the museum, which is open 2 afternoons a week, the jail, and walking tours of the town. And whereas the Clayton Historical Society provides a Clayton Studies package to the elementary schools. And whereas in 1976, the Clayton Historical Society purchased the Joel Clayton House for the museum and moved it to its current site on Main Street on land provided by the city. Whereas the Historical Society participated in the first Clayton 4th of July festivities in 1976, held its first Camellia Tea in 1977, restored the Joel Clayton House in 1979, initiated the twinning of Bugworth, Derbyshire, England, and Clayton in 1996, sponsored the first garden tour in 1993, and continues to provide services to the community. Now therefore, I, Peter A. Lawrence, Mayor of the City of Clayton, during this year of the 25th anniversary, commend the Clayton Historical Society for their contribution to Clayton and the surrounding community. Anyway, you deserve an hand. We thank your group for everything that you do for Clayton, and one of the things that we want to try to do, there's 2 things I want to try to get started before the end of the year that will go on to next year. But one of them, I know you have a video being made of the history of Clayton with the school and for target audience of young people who come through the museum and get an appreciation for Clayton. But I think it's also in the city's interest, especially while we still have some of our old timers among us, that we get a lot of this videotape, some of the anecdotes, some of the sites, some of the people, and so I'm going to try to get some city money to maybe fund a college student to help with it, and we can get a little bit of history on film, and maybe it could be an archive that other people can condense and make more interesting. But I know people that we've lost in the past, my mom, Phyllis Easton, and many others, it would be nice to have some film footage of them telling some of their better stories. And so we'll try to get something like that going, and maybe the city can help fund it. The other thing I want to try to see if we can get going is we need to attract the farm implements. Keller House someday will be your charge as well to keep up. And maybe you'll use a couple of bedrooms for storage so you can rotate things through. Maybe a couple of the bedrooms will be display rooms for your savings. But in the back area, there's no reason why we shouldn't have 2 or 3 different tractors from different vintage areas, when there were vineyards, when there were orchards, different farm implements. And we have the space there, we can start saving it. So maybe the city can do, because I know how hard it is to raise funds, maybe we can do a match and fund thing. So up to $5,000 of city money and $5,000 what we donate, we can get some of those rusty tractors in. If they're not locally still here, maybe we can get some from the valley where they're rusting out behind the barn. But I think we need to start attracting and acquiring those implements. Anyway, thank you very much. I look forward to the nice festivities.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Pete. My voice doesn't carry like it says. Thank you, Pete, and please extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to your fellow members of the City Council and to the City of Clayton for this wonderful and meaningful gesture of friendship and goodwill. The support of the City and the Council since 1974 have enabled the Society to fulfill its mission to preserve, protect, and disseminate the history of this very special town. We anticipate continuing our partnership with the city to ensure that the historic sites, the people's stories and memorabilia, and the history of this unique town be saved and preserved for future generations. Thank you. The proclamation will be on view in our museum on Sunday. We'll put it over here for you to look at before you leave tonight. Thanks so much.
This is not on your program. It's not meant to be. I'm under orders from the Association of Bugsworth and Clayton Society at Derbyshire, England, to make a presentation on their behalf to the society here. It's to celebrate your 25th anniversary. It's a card, and it has been signed by the prominent members of the association. It demonstrates, I think, their thoughts about your preparations for this particular event, and I'm sure that they are thinking of you at this very moment. If the habits continue, they are no doubt raising their glasses in the navy. The navy, for your information, is the navigation end, which is on the side of the canal in Bugsworth. And it's a familiar, easy place, and a place for celebration, as you know. So I present you on their behalf with this card.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much.
It's a photograph overlooking Bugsworth. There's a description inside describing the prominent points within Bugsworth, those of particular historical interest, and it is signed by quite a number of those names that you're familiar with. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm not going to take the time to read this. It's Bugsworth, circa 1950. And so I'm going to put it over here for you to look at before you leave tonight. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for bringing that. And now, a small party of prospective Clayton citizens who have traveled to Clayton to look over some available town lots. We have asked Joel and Margaret Clayton to share their life stories and to talk about the town of Clayton. They have agreed. It is March 2nd, 18 1972. We have all been invited into the home of Joel and Margaret Clayton.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Clayton home. I do hope you enjoyed looking about our town this afternoon. I met with some of you. I understand you had a good supper at the Clayton Hotel, and I want to assure you that you'll enjoy your lodgings there this evening. This afternoon, I talked to some of you, and you asked if Margaret and I would share our life stories with you, particularly something about the town and how we got here. Well, good evening, my dear. This is my wife, Margaret.
How do you do? I'm sorry, Arlene. I didn't realize we were going to have visitors.
Well, I kind of arranged it on the spot, my dear. They asked us if we would share our life stories with them and tell them something about the town.
Are you sure they want to hear that?
Well, they asked.
Well, they'll get it then.
Well, since you are prospective citizens of Clayton, potential town lot buyers, Margaret and I decided that we would share our life stories. And Margaret said I could go first. Clayton, California. When I first set foot here, some 19 years ago, before it was Clayton, California, it reminded me so much of my birthplace back in England. At the base of a mountain, a long valley, heavily wooded, very serene, all the way down to two converging creeks. I was born in 1812 at the Brierley Green Farm near Bucksworth, England, in Derbyshire County, north of London. I was the oldest of 12 children, a constant handful for my mother. My father was a part-time miner, part-time farmer. And nearly all of his sons went into the mines. Working in the mines, I remember as a youth, was hard, backbreaking, and dangerous work. But I always brought into the mines with me a sense of exploration, adventure. And the mines put within me an urge to explore my world, especially west of England. And you can see how far west I've come. I left England in 1837 and migrated to the United States of America, landing firstly in Boston, Massachusetts, and staying there just for a while. I'm afraid you're going to hear that phrase, just for a while, quite often from me, because above all else, you're going to find that I was a man who was very reluctant to settle down. I think you're also going to find I'm a man who liked to begin things, initiate, get things started. And then, having a very short attention span with whatever I started, I like to pass things on to others so they could run them or sell them outright if they were businesses. I think you'll also find that I'm a man who has been held up by 4 pillars in life: mining, cattle, merchandising, and last and most fortunately, finally, family. After Boston, I moved to Lowell, Massachusetts, staying there for just a while, before heading west to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My mother's brother had opened up an oil company there, and I worked with him for a few months. In the meantime, the Clayton family themselves migrated to the United States. Mother, father, most of my siblings, they came to New Orleans, went up the Mississippi, and homesteaded just west of St. Louis, Missouri. I joined them from Pittsburgh. I think it was around 1839. The Clayton clan together migrated northward, stopping in Galena, Illinois, before turning northeasterly into the Wisconsin territory, stopping in a little town called Hazel Green. My parents and my brothers and sisters stayed in the Wisconsin territory for the most part. My parents are buried in Mifflin, a town I helped found. Then Clayton stayed there, but I was ready to push off. I wanted to do more exploring. I went into the unorganized territory. We did some zinc mining on the North Platte River, and did some mining along the Salmon River. Oh yes, in between there sometime, I returned to the Wisconsin, to Hazel Green, where I very fortunately met and married my then fiancée, Margaret McClay,
That was,
during the summer of 1841.
I'm glad you remembered. It was August 28th.
August 28, 1848. And we've been married a good long while.
That would be 30 years.
30 years. Like I say, it's been a good long while. After that, I stayed in Hazel Green for just a few years, but saw the mining opportunities were not there. What I didn't wanted to do is I wanted to go farther west. But I had a firm conviction that women of any refinement, like my new wife, they did not belong west of the Mississippi River. And so I went farther west alone. I hooked up at the Hudson Bay Fur Trading Company. And I didn't want to get into the fur trading business itself. I wanted to lead wagon trains. I wanted to become a wagon train master. The Hudson Bay Company had got a large grant into the Oregon Territory. And therefore I thought I could become one of the persons who led the wagon trains across the Continental Divide onto the Oregon Trail, and usually winding up in the easterly part of the Oregon Territory, the Willamette Valley. Well, through very much persistence and finally good luck, I did become a wagon train master. My first party numbered about 200 in number and was officially called the Hudson Bay Fur Trading Brigade. Hudson Bay Fur Trading Brigade, indeed. A motley crew of wretched human beings, vile men, tough and hardened women, and always about 50 Indians to take care of the animals. Now, the main responsibility of any wagon train master is survival of the party. I soon learned that I would best be looking out for my own survival, especially with those wretched creatures. I led 4 wagon trains into the Oregon Territory, and I'm very proud to say that I do not lose one member of any party, despite the fact that we continuously faced horrendous weather. Hailstorms, sleet storms, snowstorms, rainstorms. We were constantly going up sharp inclines or descending sharp declines. I was responsible for the party against attacks during the day and especially at night. And I was constantly breaking up fights with those heathens. I swear I headed off 2 or 3 mutinies. Constantly also fighting sickness, and especially cholera. A round trip from the Wisconsin Territory out to the Oregon Territory and back would take just under a year. I think I got back the first time, wasn't it in November of 1845, my dear?
Yes, that would be Elizabeth Jane.
And the second time, I believe I got back in October of 1846.
That would be Benjamin Franklin.
And on the third time back, I believe it was September 1847.
And that would be our little Charles.
I think they get the point, my dear. On my third trip into the Willamette Valley, I noticed a very poor stream of milk. So in the fourth and last trip, I brought along a huge herd of Jersey cows. Oh, half of them died. But those that did survive brought a very healthy and plentiful milk supply to the Willamette Valley. And it's maintained to this day, and I'm very proud of that. Also along on that fourth trip, I brought trouble. My younger brother, James, who convinced me, sorry, my dear, that I should not return to Wisconsin to Margaret and my children, but instead go with him down to California and look for opportunities there. You see, I had another younger brother, Charles, who had already come to California and settled in the Santa Clara Valley. He was getting interested in the grain trading business. James convinced me to come to California. I didn't want to get in the grain trading business when I reached Santa Clara. I was attracted to the almond mines near Mission San Jose. The rich deposits of cinnabar there yielded many thousands of vials of quicksilver, and I made good money doing that. And then along came 1849. And I, along with so many others, was struck with gold fever. I left Santa Clara, went up to the Sierra, expecting to become a very wealthy man. But Lady Luck did not shine upon me. I became more destitute by the day. I did not become wealthy digging gold, but I gained something of great value through observation. Sure, I saw miners become wealthy men, sometimes overnight. But I also saw that suppliers to the miners were also becoming very wealthy, supplying mining materials and foodstuffs and clothing. I wasn't the only one up there observing. A former neighbor of mine, 20 miles up the valley to the east, Dr. John Marsh. Perhaps some of you have heard of him. He was assassinated in 1856. He too was up in the Sierra observing. But unlike me, he did strike a rich gold bar, bringing him about $30,000 to $40,000, it's rumored, in gold. But John Marsh decided he could become a wealthier man, not by digging gold, but by supplying the miners with beef. He returned to his rancho and used that gold to build up his cattle to 5,000 in number, making him eventually one of the wealthiest men in Northern California. You see, before the gold rush, the value of the steer was in its hide only, bringing $5. But with the onslaught of gold seekers, ardent beef eaters, the value of the steer shot up from $5 to $25 to $45 to $65 by 1856. I, like John Marsh, decided I would make my gold in beef. I came out of the Sierra with just a little bit of gold. Went to Stockton, California, and had just enough to put together a very small slaughterhouse. I would process the beef before it went out into the Sierra, where it would command outrageous prices. I even slaughtered some of John Marsh's cattle and charged him a high price. He got angry. And if you knew John Marsh, he's one man you did not want to make angry. But in the end, we both understood that what we're doing is what the market would bear. But like I told you, I tire of things easily. And within a year and a half, I tired of the slaughterhouse business, sold it for a good profit, wandered to San Francisco, not knowing what I was going to do next. But again, I observed that dairymen were selling off dairy cows at a rapid rate. And I bought as many dairy cows as I could. Bought 25 acres on the outskirts of the city and formed the Guadalupe Dairy in an area that I still understand goes by the name of Cow Hollow. In fact, I just recently heard that 4 city streets now border my former dairy: Webster, Clay, Pearson, and Broadway. But I tired of the dairy business rather early too, and sold it to a Mr. Bell, who I understand since then has also done quite well. I remember crossing the bay, getting on horseback, and heading east. For some reason, let the mountain of the devil, Mount Diablo, be my guide. And in early May of 1853, I came here, to this spot. Like I said, it reminded me so much of my birthplace. I knew I probably wouldn't stay here. I met up with a Mr. E.J. Clark, who owned abundant land here. He knew I had money in my pocket, so he easily and quickly sold me 40 acres, acreage we're on right now. But I wasn't ready to stay. Not then, not then. I wanted to still move on to a new territory in the West, a territory I had not been to before. And I thought of the Washington Territory up north. I wanted to try some mining, but also some merchandising. I put together a team of oxen and traveled through northern California, through Oregon Territory, up through the Washington Territory, along the coast, finally stopping at a little inlet town of Bellingham. Again, I had enough funds to put together a small trading post and build a small cabin for myself. Again, I did quite well. Surprisingly, I found my best customers were local Indians. I learned to speak their language, 5 languages of the Indians I spoke. Everything was going so well. Until one evening. It was about dusk. I was standing in the doorway of my trading post, looking out at the inlet. I saw 3 Indians come up in a canoe. Alongside them was an empty canoe. I saw they wore war paint and looks of hostility upon their faces. Sensing some kind of danger, I went down to the shoreline to meet them. I talked to them in their own language and quickly found out that for some reason they were angry at me. To cool them off a bit, I decided I would offer to buy their empty canoe. Looking for an escape plan, I told them to wait there, that I'd go back up to the trading post and get them some money. I turned, walked about 30 paces, looked back, and saw that they were hot on my heels. I ran through the trading post door, jumped out the back window, and hid and shrubs and bushes for the next 20 hours, fearing for my life, and rightfully so. For the next day I heard that Indians came into my trading post and started to ransack it. My poor clerk innocently interrupted them. They killed him, looted my trading post, burnt it down along with my cabin, and continued to look for me the rest of the day and the rest of that night and the following morning. It wasn't until about 1 o'clock the next day that I finally felt that they had gone. I quickly started to assemble an oxen team, for I knew my business days in Bellingham were over. Then almost miraculously, within an hour of leaving Bellingham, I received from a postal clerk a letter from Margaret. I had not received one for several months. How did she know? How did she know? I regard that day and that letter the turning point of my life, the most important day of my life. Tell you what, let me read the letter to you. And I think you'll understand why it is so important to me. Dearest Joel, it is my hope that this letter finds you in good health and good spirits. We received your last letter but a few days ago. I've shared it many times with the children. They had me reread the stories and descriptions of the beauty of your surroundings. Their need for contact with you, even if only through the written word, has set my mind to reflect on the situation of our separate lives. After much thought and prayer, I have set my mind to reunite our family, so that the children may have the advantage of their father's wisdom and guidance.
I have put the affairs of the present household in order, and have looked for passage on the Princess of the Mississippi. We will be transported to Louisiana, where we will find a guide to take us down to Panama and across the isthmus. We will then board a boat for our final journey up the western coast to hopefully find you waiting for us in the San Diego harbor. The children and I wait with great joy and anticipation at our reunion. With much affection, your devoted wife, Margaret. And so I gathered the 3 children around me, and I told them that we too were going to go on an adventure. We sold the things that we didn't need, packed carefully the things that we did, and we started out. There was Elizabeth, Benjamin, and Charlie, and I. Well, the trip down the Mississippi was eventful. It was fun. It was with good company and good cheer. And then we got to Louisiana. From there on, it was not as good cheer as one had hoped. Now, Joe had told me many times he feared for us to come across land, and that he thought it would be easier if we went across the isthmus were we to ever take that journey. I'm sure he thought we never would. Now, why he thought it was easier, I cannot tell. The only thing that I can think is that he has never traveled across jungle on a mule with 3 small children. It wasn't the spiders. It wasn't the strange animals or all of the people with whom I traveled, most of whom could not even conjugate a verb. But it was the snakes. It was the snakes. But we were now committed, and the only way we could to go is forward. And so we finally got across that miserable stretch that God created and why I will never know. We got to the port and found it to be full of ruffians, ne'er-do-wells, and probably less wretched and more hateful than some of the people with whom Joel had told me. I had 3 small children, and I needed to get up that harbor. And so I went up to the captain and I told him of my plight. He told me there was no room, that every steamer was fully loaded, and so I said I would stow away if he would rather, or we would take steerage. Now, this man had been at some point a gentleman, although I don't think he had shaved in, well, I have his personal grooming is well. That is beside the point. The gentleman knew that we were determined to go, and so we were able to get passage on the steamer. And the children and I, every night, prayed fervently that their father had received the letter. I had no idea if it had ever reached him. As we sailed north of the western coast, I told the children that if they said their prayers, that surely an angel would protect us. And as we sailed, I prayed that their prayers would be heard. For it was only a day or 2 out of San Diego Harbor, and I found myself in a great deal of concern and grief.
Like I said, I assembled that team of oxen, constantly wondering, would they make it? Would they make it across the Isthmus? Would she be there? I put together that team and traveled 14 to 16 hours a day down to the Washington Territory, the Oregon Territory, northern, central, southern California, finally arriving in the village of San Diego in the evening. The next day I went out to the harbor and waited all day. 3 ships of immigrants came in, but Margaret and the children were not among them. On the second day again I waited at the harbor and 2 ships came in. No Margaret, no children. The third day, no ships. On the 4th day again I waited. And it wasn't until the late afternoon when a small ship of immigrants came in, and halfway down to the disembarkation, I saw Margaret, the 3 children. And all I could do was yell out, "Margaret, over here! Over here, it's me! It's me!" The happiest day of my life. Because never again would the Clayton family be separated.
And my prayers were answered. Joel may have looked a little ragged, but to me, he was the most handsome man I had ever seen as he came running up that gangplank. The children just fell into his arms, and we all wept together. And somehow, I didn't even remember the snakes. It was all worth it. Now we went to the Tejon Pass, and there Joel set up a trading post. And that became our home. It was so different from anything that I had ever experienced. Every morning was a new adventure. There were new foods, people of different kinds, of different languages. And I learned to love them, and I learned their language, and I learned to get along with them. There was a beautiful lake fairly close to where the trading post was. And Joel was so thrilled to see the beauty of his oldest daughter, named it Lake Elizabeth. And it is a beautiful lake. I used to love to walk down there in the evenings, and I thought it was the most beautiful spot on earth. And it became the place where we buried not there were very happy memories and some very, very sad ones. And again, Joel turned his face to the west.
The loss of 3 children had a major effect on the health and feelings of both Margaret and I. I wanted to protect the young family that I did have with me still. I wanted to take that family to a healthy, a safe place. The one spot I could remember was the Willamette Valley in Oregon. It would mean an arduous trip north. Finally, I convinced Margaret that the trip should be made. And again, we formed a team of oxen, and this time northward we went. Through central California, northern California, and into the beautiful and lush Willamette Valley. We built a small home there. It looked like we would settle there. And then I noticed increasingly that the mining opportunities were not there. The cattle and the merchandising opportunities were not there either. On top of that, my brothers, Charles and James, were continually writing me letters, urging me to return to the area around San Francisco, telling me that the opportunities were in California. Return to California, Joel. Finally, once again, Margaret agreed. Again, we formed that oxen team, and this time southward we went, down through Oregon and Northern California. And then, in early May of 1857, we arrived here. I built this small house under that large oak tree out there where the 2 creeks converge. I wanted to go into the cattle business here. The valley looked great for grazing, but I didn't have the funds to raise a herd. So I thought I'd found a town here. I'd lay out a town. And I did. Main Street where the businesses go. And south of Main Street, I drew up 110 lots for people to come in and eagerly buy. They did not. For 2 years, Clayton did not grow. I tried to lure some people here by wanting to make Clayton into a railroad town. It'd be a stop-off point from the railroad coming west, stopping at Clayton, and then going out through the valley easterly to Stockton. I talked to railroad businesses, and they all seemed interested. I told them I'd give them ample right-of-ways. But as you can see, there's still no train through Clayton. And then I thought of the idea of luring the county government here to Clayton. I was willing to give free land to build a huge courthouse south of my lots. I figured out with some other surveyors that Clayton was the geographical center of the county, and I thought that'd be my strong argument along with the free land. But more powerful forces than me have kept the county government in Martinez. And then, in the most ironic period of my life, while I was so desperately searching for an inducement to give this town some growth, I was completely blinded to a potential factor for growth that had been in my life for over 30 years. Mining. In 1858, William Israel discovered a coal vein up in the foothills about 3, 4, 5 miles northeast of Clayton. Other disgruntled gold miners went up there, discovered coal veins as well. In 1860, Noah discovered a very large vein of coal. Himself being a disgruntled gold miner, he called it the Black Diamond Vein. It soon became the Black Diamond Mine. Businessmen got interested, it was incorporated, shares were sold, and very quickly it became the Black Diamond Coal Mining Company, and I bought up as many shares as I could afford. News of the mine spread across the United States, across the Atlantic, and was heard in Wales with great appeal. Coal miners in Wales were going through some rough times, very low wages. And when they heard news of the Contra Costa coal fields, they pulled up their families, got on boats, and soon arrived in the mountain foothills of Mount Diablo. So many Welshmen and their families come that some 3 or 4 years in the 1860s, a town popped up there. They named it after its founder, Nortonville. And today, with its 900 people, it's the most populated town in the county. I think Clayton has about 200, 300, 400. I invested in a general merchandising store up there, and I'm doing quite well. There's plenty of coal. And since then, mines of copper, limestone, silver, and quicksilver have been discovered in the foothills of Mount Diablo as well. I know that perhaps you've heard that the coal up there is poor, soft, slow burning. Not as good as Oregon and Washington coal. But I argue that location is the prime factor. And the cheap transportation costs of that coal up in the foothills here, sending that coal to Sacramento, Modesto, and especially San Francisco. That coal will be mined for many decades to come. 40% of the coal burned in the homes and mills of San Francisco comes from the coal fields of Contra Costa County. Mining had a great impact in jump-starting Clayton as a town. People came into Clayton to live. Miners in the mining towns would come down and, of course, patronize our businesses, especially on the weekends, to enjoy our entertainment spots. It's just what Clayton needed for growth. My dear, why don't you tell these folks some more about our young town?
Well, we have all of the amenities that anyone would want. We have a livery stable, and we have a blacksmith shop. We have a hotel. We have a baseball team. We have a dance hall. We have 2 churches and a saloon. We have all sorts of wonderful activities. We get together for picnics, and people come from all over the county. In fact, at our last one, we had several weddings where everyone was there and the couple decided to take advantage of the proximity of their families. We had games, we had an orchestra, we have all sorts of wonderful things for families. It is a beautiful and a wonderful place to be. We also have a dentist over in Pittsburgh. You can get your teeth pulled every Thursday afternoon at the hotel, and her haircut at the same time if you'd like. And you know, many of us have had to resort to some of our own ways in taking care of each other because we are a little far away from San Francisco. But you know, the other day, Mrs. Perk had her son fall on the barbed wire, and he had a terrible gash on his arm. And she just pulled the hair out of the tail of a horse, boiled it, and sewed it up with one of her fanciest stitches. I think he'll probably show that off for the longest time. It's a good place. We pull together. The climate is beautiful. We have salmon coming right up our stream. We have grapes. We have grain. We have cattle. We have good people. And our city is going to grow. And it's not going to be lost in the urban sprawl. It's going to have its own personality. It's going to have its own name, its own state of city. It is a beautiful place. I just can't see how you could find any better place to call home. Now, Joe has been everywhere. I'll tell you, he has been everywhere. And if he says this is the most beautiful place on earth, I have to agree. It's the place that we call home. And I think you would like to call it home also. Do you agree, Joe?
Yes, very much so. I agree with everything you said. And for some of you listeners, I want to stress the opportunity here for you. I've maintained my business in cattle for over 15 years now. My herd is now 400. I've accumulated 1,400 acres here, but there's much acreage to still be bought by you. I've invested in coal and limestone and copper mines. I own a general merchandising store here in Clayton outright and have interest in other businesses as well. As Margaret alluded to, 3 years ago, I planted about 30 acres of grapes. We all found out that grapes now grow quite well here, as does wheat, if farming is your interest. And a year ago, I built a small sherry house. And some tasters say that I make the best sherry in the state of California. I know that you have questions, but Margaret, I suddenly am growing quite tired. Would you please answer the questions that we might have? I forgot to tell you this, dear, but tomorrow morning I'm going to have to rise about 4 o'clock in the morning. I have to go up in the hills. Some cows have strayed too far. I've got. Yes?
I wish you wouldn't go.
Well, I have to, dear. If I don't get those cattle, someone else will. That is a negative feature of the cattle business. One final word. Margaret and I have shared our life story with you. Told you something about our young town, the opportunities here. We know that tomorrow all of you will leave by stagecoach returning to your homes. Some of you will continue to think about returning to Clayton, and some of you will. And I know that those who do will stay. So in advance, I say welcome, good night, and best wishes. Good night, my dear.
Joel, I wish you'd reconsider. I see a storm gathering, and the weather has been very unpredictable.
I'll be all right, dear.
Joel, please. I have a very bad feeling about this.
I must get my cattle. I must get my cattle.
And so he did. The next morning he did arise at 4 o'clock, and he went out to find the cattle that were lost, and amongst them a little calf that had been wounded, and he picked him up. And Joel, even though he has a large stature, over 6 feet and nearly 300 pounds, often thought of as totally invincible, carried that little calf home and was physically spent when he got home. He was soaked and he was chilled. And even though I put him right to bed and gave him all of the medication that I could find, and even called Sarah Norton to come and help me, his fever got worse and worse. And finally, I sent Benjamin for Charles. Charles came and took him to Black Diamond where the physician was. And I waited to hear. And finally he came back and told me that Joel had died. I was not prepared for that, for Joel had always been invincible. His dreams were bigger than life. His energy there I was left with his dreams. His dreams were good dreams, but they were not negotiable, and I was left virtually penniless. Had it not been for the generosity and the hospitality of my daughter and of his brother's care, I do not know what our family would have done. But Joel's dream lived on, and the city flourished, and then it would dwindle, and then it flourished again, never again to dwindle. And Joe's dream has become a reality. And I hope that someday people will be aware of the effort and energy it took of this great man with great vision to give us a community in which we can all love and enjoy. And I say this with great and fond memory of a great founder of a beautiful little town.
Well, thank you very much. You've been a very nice audience. And for the Claytons, we hope we did your family proud. That's it for this evening. Thanks for coming. It was such a great 25th anniversary. Thank you.